Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the life you are living is not the life you once had dreamed of. You remember fragments of your younger self, the wild ambitions. Yet somewhere along the way, those dreams twisted into something else. They became diluted, reshaped by invisible hands, and you find yourself asking, with a pand. The truth is unsettling. The job you wanted becomes the prison you can't live. The relationships you longed for turn into obligations that suffocate you. Even the idea of happiness, once a bright flame of possibility, morphs into a tormenting reminder of how far you still are from it. How is it that what we most desire becomes the root of our deepest suffering? Consider this paradox. Fear does not only stop us from pursuing our dreams, it also shapes them, affects them, and silently dictates their direction. It is as if fear hides inside the very fabric of desire, whispering from the shadows, bending our choices. We dream of success, not out of love for life, but out of terror of failure. We dream of relationships, not out of pure longing for connection, but out of fear of being alone. Even freedom itself becomes twisted. We chase it not because we are courageous, but because we are terrified of being controlled. So here you are standing at the edge of your own aspirations. Uncertain whether the dreams you carry belong to you at all? Ask yourself honestly, how many of your desires are born from your own authentic self, and how many are simply the masks fear has dressed up as dreams? Imagine a painter who no longer paints because every brushstroke feels haunted by the fear of not being good enough, or a writer who abandons their manuscript because the terror of criticism becomes greater than the joy of creation. Imagine a child who wanted to be an explorer, but years later ends up in an office, trapped in routines. Because fear of instability and compromise, these are not rare tragedies. They are the ordinary stories of almost of our own, you know? Perhaps they are your story too. What if the very mechanism that promises to protect you, fear, is also the architect of your prison? Fear, after all, is ancient. It kept our ancestors alive, alert to predators, lurking in theatric. But in the modern world, where lions rarely stalk us, fear has grown more sophisticated, subtler, and far more insidious. It now stalks your psyche. It whispers in your thoughts. It disguises itself as responsibility, caution, realism, even love. But underneath all its masks, it limits you. And here lies the great question, the one you may have avoided your whole life. If fear secretly rules your dreams, are they even your dreams at all? Let this question linger for a moment. Do not rush to answer it, because the moment you trellis it with it, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of shame, fear of death, fear of not being enough, each one quietly rearranging your decisions, narrowing your possibilities, until you are left chasing goals that were never truly yours. Only nightmares wearing the mask of aspiration, so perhaps the more unsettling thought is not that you are afraid to chase your dreams. Perhaps it is that fear has already written your dreams for you. What then becomes of freedom? What becomes of authenticity? What becomes of the life imagined when you were young and unbroken by fear? These are the questions that tear open the fabric of the everyday. And the deeper you look, the more you realize the true battle is not out there in the world, but in the hidden corners of your own mind, where fear quietly reshapes desire into something unrecognizable. If you dare to follow this thread, if you dare to uncover how fear turns dreams into nightmares, you will have to confront truths that are neither comfortable nor easy. But within that confrontation lies the possibility of something else, something greater, and that is where we must go next. You've begun to sense it now, the strange way fear disguises itself, the way it lurks behind thievery dreams that once felt pure. But to truly grasp how this happens, we must dig deeper, for below the surface of your day-to-day choices, into the tangled roots of psychology and philosophy. Only there can we see how fear plants itself in the soil of human desire, slowly growing into something that looks like ambition, but carries within it the seed of torment. Carl Jung once warned that what you resist persists. Fear, in this sense, is not merely an enemy that blocks your path. It is a shadow that grows stronger the more you try to escape it. The problem begins when the unconscious mind, the vast ocean of thoughts, memories, and instincts that shape you, internalizes fear as a silent law of existence. You may believe you are race driving towards success, freedom, or love, but underneath, you're often obeying the dictates of fear. The unconscious says, become successful, or you will be worthless. Find love, or you will die alone. Stay safe, or you will be destroyed. And so, the dream is already poisoned before you even begin. Nietzsche saw a similar dynamic in what he called the slave morality of modern life. People harged do not always strive for greatness out of strength, but often chase goals out of weakness, out of fear of standing out, fear of failure, fear of their own untamed power. In this way, society subtly encourages conformity, disguised as ambition. We are told to work harder, achieve more, climb higher, but rarely do we ask, to what end? If the fuel is fear, then the dream is not a dream, but an obligation, a nightmare polished to look respectable. Consider how education itself often operates. From an early age, children are rewarded not for creativity or authentic expression, but for obedience and conformity. The fear of disappointing parents, the fear of falling behind peers, the fear of being labeled a failure, these begin shaping the psyche long before the child can articulate what they truly want. By adulthood, most people no longer know whether their ambitions are genuine or if they are simply echoes of old fears internalized as truth. This is not a new observation. Schopenhauer believed that at the core of all human striving lies a restless will, an insatiable force that drives us forward. Endlessly desiring, endlessly fearing the void of desire unfulfilled. Dreams, in his view, are rarely about happiness itself, but about the desperate attempt to escape suffering. In this sense, fear is not just part of desire. It is often its foundation. You don't long for success purely out of joy. You long for it to avoid the pain of insignificance. You don't chase love out of pure connection. You chase it to shield yourself. From the terror of loneliness, modern psychology has mapped similar truths. Studies on motivation reveal that humans are far more powerfully driven by the avoidance of pain than the pursuit of pleasure. Fear is a stronger motivator than joy. This is why failure, shame, and rejection hold such disproportionate power over us. They shape the architecture of our goals. If you peel back the layers of your dreams, how many are rooted in longing, and how many are rooted in avoidance? Think about addiction, something Gabor Mate has explored in depth. He argues that addiction is not about pleasure, but about the attempt to escape pain. The drink, the drug, the compulsive work, the obsessive relationship, all are masks for fear, temporary shields against the unbearable weight of existence. But the more you rely on them, the more they transform from dream into nightmare, trapping you in cycles you cannot easily escape. Addiction is only a extreme version of what most people live daily. Fear-drenched striving that looks like ambition on surface but hides despair underneath. At its root, the hidden problem is this. Fear has become the architect of our inner world, yet we rarely notice its presence. It's as if a silent dictator rules over our choices, and we mistake its commands for our own free will. You say you want stability, but really you're terrified of chaos. You say you want recognition, but really you're haunted by the thought of being invisible. You say you want love, but really you fear abandonment. Fear is the author, and you are the actor performing a script you didn't know was written for you. Even Sartre, who believed in radical freedom, warned of this trap. He spoke of bad faith, the self-deception we fall into when we pretend we are not free. When we deny the true weight of four choices by blaming them on circumstance, society, or necessity. But fear thrives in this denial. It convinces you that your path is inevitable, that you have no choice but to chase the dream it dictates. And in believing this, you hand over your freedom without a fight. Yet the cruelest part is how this hidden force reshapes your very identity. When fear molds your dreams, it also molds your sense of self. If your worth is tied to achievement, then failure doesn't just mean falling short, it means annihilation. If your identity is tied to being loved, then rejection doesn't just hurt, it shatters the core of who you believe you are. Fear makisu, fragile because it makes you dependent on outcomes you cannot control. This is why so many people live in quiet desperation. Their lives looking polished on the surface but hollow underneath. They may succeed, but success feels empty. They may find love, but love feels anxious. They may reach their goals, but instead of peace, they feel a gnawing. Hunger for more. It is the nightmare unfolding in slow motion, fear masquerading as fulfillment. And so the question deepens. If fear is this hidden architect, silently shaping your desires, your choices, your identity, how much of your life has truly been yours? And how much has been a performance written by fear itself? This is the question you cannot ignore, because until it is confronted, the nightmare only tightens its grip. But what happens when you do confront it? What happens when you see not only the problem, but its unseen consequences on your life and on society as a whole? That is where we must go next. By now, you've glimpsed the hidden engine. Fear not only restrains, but actively forges the very shape of your dreams. Yet its true danger is not only in how it begins, but in what it produces. Fear-driven ambitions do not vanish quietly. They carry consequences that seep into every corner of your existence. Consequences so subtle, so pervasive, that you may not even recognize them until your life feels unbearably heavy. The first consequence is paralysis disguised as productivity. On the surface, you may appear busy, endlessly striving, constantly moving, but the movement is circular, like a caged animal pacing back and forth. You set goals, pursue them with anxious energy, but when you achieve them, the relief is fleeting, the satisfaction shallow. Fear-driven dreams cannot nourish the soul. They can only silence it temporarily. And so you remain hungry, restless, endlessly reaching forth next milestone. It feels like ambition, but in truth, it is fear ensuring you never rest, never breathe, never discover who you might be without the constant chase. This is why so many people speak of burnout, of emptiness even in success. The modern world applauds those who grind themselves into exhaustion, yet beneath the applause lies quite despair. It is not hard work itself that destroys. It is fear disguised as duty, a relentless whisper that says, if you stop, you are nothing. The second consequence lies in relationships. When fear shapes your dreams, it also shapes how you connect with others. If you seek love out of fear of loneliness, what kind of bond do you create? One rooted in dependency, in anxiety, in the desperate need for validation. Love comes less about giving and more about clinging. If you pursue friendships out of fear of isolation, you may surround yourself with people who never truly see you, because you never dared to reveal your authentic self in the first place. Fear ensures that even intimacy becomes hollow, haunted by the dread of being abandoned. And when fear dictates your relationships, you begin to lose the very thing you wanted most, genuine connection. You are never fully known, never fully loved, because the mask fear foresees you to wear keeps your true self hidden. In this way, the dream of love becomes a nightmare of performance, a fragile illusion that collapses the moment rejection arrives. But perhaps the most devastating consequence is how fear-driven dreams infect society itself. Look around at the culture of achievement that dominates the modern world. Why do corporations push endless growth? Why do individuals drown in debt to appear successful? Why is self-worth tied to productivity, status, and possessions? Beneath it all lies the same ancient engine, fear. Fear of insignificance, fear of being forgotten, fear of falling behind. Aldous Huxley warned in Brave New World of societies where comfort and conformity becometh chains of the human spirit. Today, we live in a culture where fear has been industrialized, packaged into advertisements, weaponized in politics, woven into every social comparison on your glowing screens. Fear tells you that you are never enough, so you buy more, work more, perform more. But no matter how much you achieve, the void never closes, because it was never achievement that could fill it. Even neuroscience affirms this. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, has disproportionation full over our choices. When activated, it hijacks decision-making, narrowing focus to threats, real or imagined. Over time, chronic fear reshapes neural pathways, making you more reactive, more anxious, more vulnerable to manipulation. A society drenched in fear is societally controlled, and perhaps that is why fear is not only tolerated but encouraged by those who benefit from your compliance. Consider the subtle ways this plays out. You dream of financial security, but debt chains you tighter. You dream of freedom, but technology ensnares you with constant surveillance and comparison. You dream of belonging, but social media leaves you lonelier than ever. Each dream begins with a spark of hope. It ends in disillusionment, because fear was woven into its foundation from the start. And what does this mean for the self? Over time, fear-driven living erodes your identity. You'll forget who you are when no one is watching. You forget what you would have chosen if fear had not been whispering in your ear all along. You become, as Dostoevsky described, a divide-buying yearning for authenticity, yet enslaved to invisible masters. The tragedy is not simply that fear has consequences, but that these consequences become so normalized you no longer recognize them as symptoms of a deeper sickness. Think about the silent compromises you make every day. You stay in a job that drains you because fear tells you it's safer than uncertainty. You silence your voice in conversations. Base fear warns you not to stand out. You ignore your passions because fear insists they're impractical. Each small decision seems trivial, but together they weave the tapestry of your life. And one day you wake up to realize that the tapestry is not yours at all. It is a patchwork. Quilt-off fears disguised as choices. The consequence is not only personal. When millions live under fear's reign, society itself reflects it. Creativity withers. Conformity spreads. True visionaries are silenced or dismissed base. They threaten the fragile order fear has built. Innovation becomes shallow, driven not by wonder, but by the need to survive. Communities fracture. Trust erodes. Empathy collapses. Because fear convinces individuals to retreat into self-preservation. The collective dream becomes a collective nightmare. And perhaps the most haunting consequence of all is this. Fear makes you complicit in your own diminishment. No tyrant is more effective than the one who convinces you to police yourself. Fear does not always need chains, prisons, or punishments. It whispers in your thoughts, and you obey without question. You silence your own voice. You shrink your own dreams. You limit your own life. Pause here and ask yourself, how much of your suffering is not from the world itself, but from the prison you built within, brick by brick at fear's command? How many nightmares are you living now that once began as dreams, reshaped and distorted until they became something unreconcilable? This recognition is not meant to break you, it is meant to wake you. Because once you see the unseen consequences of fear, you cannot unsee them. And once you recognize that the nightmare is not inevitable but constructed, you are left with a choice. Do you continue to obey fear, allowing it to write the script of your existence? Or do you dare to take back authorship of your life, no matter the cost? That is the question that must be faced now, the rebellion that demands to be born. Every nightmare ends the same way, with the dreamer realizing they are trapped, and yet, within that moment of realization lies the possibility of awakening. If fear has written the script of your life, then rebellion begins when you take back the pen. But what does it mean to truly break free? The first step is not courage in the traditional sense. It is honesty, brutal, unflinching honesty. To rebel against fear, you must first name it where it hides. Ask yourself, what is the real reason I chase this dream? What am I truly afraid will happen if I do not achieve it? You may discover what you thought was ambition is really terror of insignificance, and what you thought was love is really fear of abandonment. The rebellion begins when you stop dressing fear in the language of desire. Carl Jung believed that transformation begins in the confrontation with the shadow, those hidden parts of ourselves we refuse to see. Fear thrives in the shadows, whispering from dark corners of your unconscious. To break free, you must drag it into the light. This does not mean eradicating fear that is impossible. It means seeing it clearly, naming it without shame, and refusing to let it be the hidden master of your life. Nietzsche, in his call to become who you are, points us to the same truth. Breaking free from fear is not about achieving external markers of success. It is about reclaiming authorship of your existence. The rebel is not the one who destroys everything, but the one who refuses to live by a script imposed by fear. To live authentically is to risk failure, rejection, even ridicule, but it is also to live without chains. How do you do this in practice? Start small. Fear feeds on silence and avoidance. Each time act despite fear's whisper, you weaken its grip. Speak your truth in a conversation where you'd normally stay quiet. Take one step toward a dream that feels too unrealistic. Allow yourself to disappoint the expectations of others if those expectations suffocate your soul. Rebellion is not a single dramatic gesture. It is a daily practice of refusing to betray yourself. Consider Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps by holding on to a truth deeper than fear. That meaning is not dictated by circumstance, but by the choices we make in response to it. Even in the face of unimaginable suffering, he refused to let fear define his spirit. His rebellion was not against external forces, which he could not control, but against the internal surrender that fear demanded. His lesson is clear. Freedom is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to bow to it. But rebellion also requires something counterintuitive: the willingness to embrace discomfort. Fear thrives because we worship comfort, mistaking it for safety. Yet true safety is an illusion. Life itself is uncertainty, flux, impermanence. When you cling to comfort, you build your prison wall sheer, mistaking security for life itself. The rebel shatters this illusion by stepping willingly into discomfort, choosing growth over safety, authenticity over approval. There is also a deeper layer to this rebellion, one that challenges the very assumptions of modern society. If fear has been industrialized, if corporations, institutions, and cultural norms profit from your insecurity, then breaking free is not merely personal but revolutionary. To refuse fear is to reject the systems that thrive on it. It means no longer being a compliant consumer of dreams sold to you in advertisements. It means redefining success on your own terms, rather than by society's metrics. It means daring to live in ways that make others uncomfortable, because authenticity always disrupts conformity. This is why rebellion often feels lonely. To break free from fear is to step outside the herd. Sartre warned that freedom comes with the unbearable weight of responsibility. When you are no longer guided by fear, you cannot hide behind excuses. You must decide for yourself what life means. That is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying, because no one can do it for you. Liberating, because it is only then that your life truly becomes your own. But rebellion is not sustained by defiance alone. To live beyond fear, you must cultivate something stronger than fear: love, curiosity, wonder, or meaning. These are the forces that transform rebellion from mere resistance into creation. If you rebel only by saying no, fear will eventually creep back. But if you replace fear's script with your own, one fueled by love of life, by curiosity about the unknown, by a commitment to meaning greater than yourself, then you do more than resist. You transcend. Think of the artist who creates not to avoid failure, but to express truth. Think of the lover-haunter's relationship, not to escape loneliness, but to give themselves fully. Think of the dreamer, who pursues their vision not to prove worth, but to live authentically. These are the quiet acts of rebellion that dismantle fear's empire. Rebellion does not guarantee ease. It demands sacrifice. You may lose approval, stability, even comfort. But what you gain is worth infinitely more: the ability to look at your life and know it as sire's. No longer a nightmare scripted by fear, but a story authored by courage and authenticity. And yet even rebellion has a deeper layer still. To break free is not simply to resist fear, but to recognize its paradoxical gift. Fear shows you where your freedom lies. It points to the places in your life where you are most alive, most vulnerable, most called to act. The rebel does not inhabit fear. They transform their relationship to it. They see fear not as the architect, but as signal. Here is where your liberation begins. So the question becomes, are you willing to rebel, not just once, but every day? Are you willing to confront fear in the boardroom, in your relationships, in the silence of your own mind? Hansi, you will not decide my life for me. This is the rebellion that turns nightmares back into dreams. And it leads us toward the deepest realization of all the ultimate truth that fear has been guarding. The insight that can redefine your entire existence. Imagine, for a moment, that you have confronted your fear, dragged it from the shadows, and rebelled against its silent tyranny. You've named it, challenged it, refused to let it dictate the shape of your dreams. And yet there is still one question lingering in the silence. What now? If fear has been your master for so long, what remains when its chains are broken? Here lies the final paradox. The very thing you feared most was never your enemy at all. Fear was not the destroyer of your dreams, but their mirror. It was pointing, always pointing, toward very places where your soul was waiting to be born. The ultimate truth is this: fear is not the end of freedom, it is the doorway to it. Carl Jung taught that where your fear is, there is your task. The shadow we run from is the part of ourselves most in need of integration. Fear is not the signal to turn away, but the compassioning you, the direction of your deepest becoming. The reason fear twists dreams into nightmares is because you mistake its voice for a command to retreat, when in truth, it is an invitation to advance. Think of it this way: every dream worth pursuing will terrify you. Not because it is wrong, but because it threatens the old self, the smaller self built by conformity, survival, and comfort. Fear arises precisely because the dream demands transformation. It is not a warning of death, but of rebirth. To live a life without fear is not only impossible, it is undesirable. A life without fear is a life without growth. Without the trembling awe that comes when you stand at the edge of something greater than yourself. Nietzsche's call to embrace the eternal recurrence, to live as if you would choose the same life over and over for eternity, was not a celebration of comfort but of courage. He dared us to live so authentically that even the terrors of existence could be embraced as part of a whole. Fear, in this sense, is not the obstacle to authenticity, but its companion. The question is not, will he feel fear, but rather, what will I do with it? The truth most people never realize is that fear loses its power the moment you stop obeying it. Fear feeds on avoidance. When you step toward it, when you walk into the fire, you discover that the fire is not there to burn you, but to forge you. Every time you act, despite fear, the nightmare dissolves, and the dream is revealed in its true form, not as a demand born from insecurity, but as an authentic expression of who you are becoming. This is why Dostoevsky wrote that man is what he hides. Beneath the layers of fear, the masks, the false ambitions, lies the self you have been avoiding. To face your fear is to face yourself. And in doing so, you discover that the nightmare was never the dream itself. It wasted refusal to live it.
Fully Gabor Mate's work on trauma illuminates this truth in another light.
He shows us that most of what we fear, rejection, abandonment, inadequacy, is not rooted in the present moment but in wounds carried from the past. Fear twists our dreams into nightmares because it hijacks them with old pain, making the future feel like a battlefield for ghosts long gone. The ultimate realization, then, is that healing fear is not about eliminating it, but about reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned in childhood. The parts that still tremble in the dark. And here, the most radical shift reveals itself. Freedom is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to carry it with you as you walk toward what matters most. To live authentically is not a wait for the day you are fearless. That day will never come. It is to live despite fear, to McAfee your companion rather than your master. Look at the greatest lives in history. You will see this truth. The artist who painted despot or ridicule, the philosopher who spoke despite persecution, the reformer who marched despotriates. None of them were fearless. All of them were trembling, but they trembled forward. Their fear was not their nightmare. Their nightmare would have been silence. Surrender, complicity. And so the ultimate truth is not that fear turns dreams into nightmares. It is that your refusal to face fear does. Fear itself is neutral. It is energy, raw and untamed, waiting for direction. Left unconscious, it imprisons you. Faced consciously, it liberates you. The dream and the nightmare, the same force, divided only by how you respond. Imagine, then, what your life would look like if you no longer obeyed fear. If you saw it not as a wall, but as a threshold. If every tremor in your chest became a signal of where your soul is asking you to step, how many dreams would you reclaim? How many masks would you shed? How many silent prisons would crumble the moment you dared to walk forward anyway? Perhaps the most profound realization is this. The goal is not to destroy fear, but to love it. To embrace it as the companion that walks beside you on the path of becoming. Without fear, your dreams would not challenge you. Without fear, there would be no growth, no transformation, no authenticity. Fear is the fire that burns away what is false, leaving only what is real. So let the nightmare dissolve. Let the dream return to its true form. Each time fear rises, whisper to yourself, "This is the sign I am alive. This is the proof I am stepping into my becoming. This is not the end, this is the beginning." And when you wake tomorrow, and fear greets you again, as it always will, do not run from it. Thank it. Walk with it. And remember, the dream was never meant to be easy. It was meant to make you whole.